to another episode of the Politics and Religion Podcast. I am your host, Tish, aka Clarity Speaks, one half of your politics and religion illustrious duo, that is Tony and Tish. And as you can see, yet again, one of us is absent, right? I'm flying solo as he was flying solo a couple weeks ago. And if you want the tea, the insight on why we've switching it up a little bit, then check out episode 5. And that lets you know why we are a bit solo, okay? But we're going to come back and activate our Wonder Twin powers. And we're going to pick things back up where we left off as a duo once my semester is over. But in the meantime, I had to hop on here because I had some free time this weekend to, talk about this coronavirus because it's just under my skin, the hysteria that is going on. I'm calling this episode Mass Hysteria for Maximum Manipulation. And I want to get into what I've been thinking or suspecting is the root cause of the coronavirus, its complete origin. And there are some supporting materials that I'm going to share with you today that, somewhat corroborates or supports. How about that? Supports my line of thinking. And it is letting me know that I'm not the only one with this line of thinking. And actually, there was some information that came across my radar today that was kind of like, girl, yeah, do this video and just continue to get over, what you feel. Because I tell you, every time I speak, I'm counting the cost. Right? So, with that being said, I've had to have a lot of come to Jesus meeting, about my voice and it being on the wrong side of culture, because I've grown a lot in the sense that I don't care a lot about anymore what people think because God has given me the revelation from John chapter 2, where Jesus was doing the miracles and someone came up to him and he was like, I see you doing a lot of miracles or whatever, and people were believing and things of that nature. And Jesus was like, okay, yeah, I see they believe me, but I'm not entrusting myself to them because I know what's in man, you see. So he brings me back to that remembrance anytime I start to fear men's faces or feel like, man, God, I really want to be liked, Lord, I'm just continually putting myself out here to not be liked, right? But then I go back to that scripture and I'll be like, oh yeah, I know what's in man. Honey, they will flip on you in a minute. So you would do well to not be putting your trust in men. And just based on what men and mankind are tolerating and assenting and approving of, I don't want your approval anyway. I don't want your friendship anyway. Most of, what I'm saying? The people, I don't want your friendship because we don't have the same values. You know what I mean? So I have to snap out of that sometimes, right? And just go ahead and rock on the side of the truth. Because as I always say, I don't have to be right when I'm patient. Because truth always has a way of revealing and vindicating itself and those who stood 10 toes down for her. All right. So with that being said, I'm just going to go on and put it out here what I think is really going on with this coronavirus. And then I'm going to give you my supporting materials. OK. But the deal is, where can I find my thoughts that I didn't jot it down? Where are my thoughts that I didn't jot it down? I always have my thoughts jotted down. But basically, here we go. I am suspecting, folks, that this coronavirus has been deliberately released on the Chinese citizens by its government so as to create this hysteria as a covert assist in America's deep state campaign to dethrone the president. I know that's a reach, but we're talking about a communist country who has, for the past 30 years, who have been getting a very sweet deal from actually made possible by the American left, in that they sent the American manufacturing jobs over to China to help build its economy, on the guise of, we are creating a new technologic solar economy in America. So that's where the new jobs are going to be. We don't need these old manufacturing jobs. So y'all take them, China. That's our light work. And China was like, bet. And so for the past 30 years, China has been enacting, ironically, capitalist type economic principles in their economy, and they have been growing, right? And if you notice, in the past 30 years, particularly if you've been an entrepreneur and you're trying to get products and things made, you're getting them made in China, because China is undercutting manufacturers here in America, because it costs more to have something made in America than it is in China. So you have entrepreneurs, giving all their business to China. But here's how China, did the okie doke on these very economically ignorant leftists in our government. They said, okay, send the manufacturing jobs to China. And then China was like, okay, we're going to steal y'all intellectual property. And we're going to put it on our version of Amazon, which is Alibaba. And then we're going to make your products. And then we're going to undercut your products by making knockoffs. And then we're going to send you back your products that you're going to sell. And then we're going to send copies of your products over to America and sell them too. Like double dipping. This is what Trump has had a problem with. And this is not he's had this problem since the 1980s. If you Google him, he's been saying the same thing since the 1980s, how these foreign countries are really literally screwing us with no Vaseline. But we smart though. We so hot to turn this into a socialist country. But lest I go down that rabbit trail, I'm trying to paint the picture of the motivation for China to do something like this, because again, we are talking about a communist country where murdering their citizens for what they consider, the greater good of their country and the regime. Oh, that's normal practice. That's normal practice. Okay? So let's because the first thing about, oh my God, they wouldn't do this to themselves. We're talking about a communist country where murdering their citizens is part of protocol. Okay? Anybody that gets out of line, and if they need to do something like this so as to stop Trump, because while they are on the front end looking like they are playing nice with Trump and buckling to the tariffs he's enacted so as to correct this imbalance in the trading policy and bring manufacturing jobs back to Americans. China's not feeling that. They don't want their gravy train stopped. 30 years of this has been made possible by leftist Democrats and rhino Republicans. China's been able to do this. There's cozy relationships. Mitch McConnell has relationships in China. We all know Joe Biden had relationships in China. And what's my girl name? Dianne Feinstein had relationships in China. Like top congressional officials who be making laws that will allow for China to but anyway, we had the whole NAFTA thing, which was enacted in the 90s that Congress people supported. And then you had, God knows how many little small sweetheart deals, as we see from Joe Biden's case with his son, going on. So there's incentive here. And you would say, well, the American people, they wouldn't stoop to do something like that. Our congressional people wouldn't stoop to do something like that. I'm just going to say Seth Rich. Google Seth Rich and the DNC 2016. And that's just recent history. Lest I digress. Things I don't have facts on. I don't go into a lot of speaking about per se relative to people's demise. But just Google Seth Rich if you want to think that we ain't capable of some very heinous and nefarious things. So basically, Trump has disrupted and threatened the legacy that China has had over the past 30 years, the sweetheart deal that he's had made possible by Democrats and rhino Republicans. And they're right now on the front end, appearing to be buckling under the tariffs and everything and doing this deal, playing nice with Trump. But really in the background, could it be? And I'm only asking the question, could it be that they are backstabbing and coordinating a sabotage? Because the only thing right now in Trump's, not the only thing, I'm sorry, but the leading thing that's Trump's biggest accomplishment is the economy. And the Democrats have pulled out every stop. As you see, nothing has worked. So now they want to tank the economy. And in tanking the economy, eventually China is going to win. And they are probably willing to take a dip really quickly to get him away so that we can resume the status quo politics as usual pre-Donald Trump days. That's what I suspect, everyone. And I'm not the only one who suspected, because Mr. David Horowitz of the David Horowitz Foundation. He has a foundation. It's basically a think tank. And what it does is they've basically been sounding the alarm for the past 27 years about policies that are endangering our freedoms. And he says something in his bio, and I'm going to leave a link in the show notes of this podcast where you can read the things that I am sharing. But Mr. Horowitz, he is again the founder of the Freedom Center. That's the name of his conservative think tank, and their emphasis is on public policy and institutional reforms, right? And he says that he sees his role as a battle tank geared to fight a war that many people still don't realize is going on. People don't even recognize it. And that's why what I'm saying is sounding so like far-fetched. Like, girl, you on one, Tish. You Alex Jonesy on me. No, it sounds that way because of just what Mr. Horowitz has said. People with discernment, we're sounding the alarm and fighting a war that many people don't even realize that we out here twerking and hitting the woe and and doing all these other things, talking about leaving a legacy and wealth building and all this type of stuff, and have no clue. The very people talking about this have no clue that you supporting a candidate that's going to make it impossible for you to build wealth, to leave any kind of legacy to anybody. That baffles me. But anyway, I'm on here with Mr. Horowitz feeling the same way. And he says something that totally resonates with me. He says that the center has been warning that the political left has declared war on America and its constitutional system. And peep this, and they are willing to collaborate with America's enemies abroad and criminals at home to bring America down. I'm going to say that again. They are willing to collaborate with America's enemies abroad and criminals at home to bring America down. And that is the reason that I have this notion or this suspicion. Again, I would love to be proven wrong. The difference, in my opinion, between someone that's a crazed conspiracy theorist and that's obsessed is that they stick to these conspiracies even in the face of something that proves it wrong. I, on the other hand, just need to see some receipts. And I'm pivoting. I don't have a dog in the fight like that, in the sense that I'm just going hard for the Republicans. I'm just going hard for this particular idea that I have. I'm just kind of, reading the tea leaves. And I don't have a problem with saying that's what I'm doing. I'm suspecting something. But based on what has been revealed about the level of corruption that the Democrats are engaging in, and in my estimation, even the Republicans, by proxy of their top tolerance all of these years, is leading me to believe that the things that I'm suspecting is not too far-fetched. I may not be bullseye, but I'm certainly in the ballpark somewhere. And so here's what Mr. Horowitz says that tipped me off and said, okay, yeah, you should go ahead and do this podcast. He wrote an article back on March the 2nd of this year, just this past week, where he says an Obama holdover in an obscure government arm helped cause the country's coronavirus crisis. In other words, who really decided to bring the infected people back into the United States after the president had declared the quarantine and closed the borders to anyone, even Americans, who had the virus? If you had the virus and you were American, you were to be quarantined. So if you were an American and you come from China, or if you were on that cruise ship or whatever, you come away from the incubator of the infection, but you don't come into the population. We're going to quarantine you so that we can get you properly tested, find out if you got the virus. If you have it, we'll go ahead and treat you, and then you're going to stay in quarantine. Then we'll let you back in. That was a plan, and that was working just fine until just this week, when all of a sudden, what do you hear? Coronavirus in Washington, in California, and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And word on the street, according to Mr. Horowitz, his research has found, it ain't no found, I mean, this is public knowledge now, that this was done by someone where? In the State Department, which is the belly of the deep swamp beast. So an Obama holdover, someone who stayed in that position from the Obama administration, and they're still in there, working on the original mission to get Trump out of there. And what's crazy to me is that Trump has allowed anybody from the Obama administration to stay on. And that says a lot about him, in the sense that, first of all, he knows that he was an outsider. So he didn't come in like a bull in a china shop. He was clearly trying to work with people initially. And you saw that by the people that he hired initially, and that he was trying to work with. He was taking advice of his deep state counselors initially. Bring on whatever forget the initial, the first Secretary of State. Bring on this person, bring on that person. He was trying to listen to his counselors, even though the narrative was that he wasn't listening to his counselor. The reason that he's gotten into so much controversy is because he didn't. He did listen, and he was letting backstabbers around him. So these Obama holdovers are still hanging around, and they're still working on the original mission. And so, what needs to happen in order for Trump not to get elected? Because everything that they've tried has failed so far. They need to now tank the economy and blame the coronavirus spread on him. That's what needs to happen. And Mr. Horowitz goes as far as to say that. And I'm going to read some of his article here. Okay? This again is David Horowitz. He's the founder of a think tank called the David Horowitz Freedom Center. And basically, he starts out by saying, 2 months after the outbreak of the coronavirus, Trump virus, #Trump virus, began trending on Twitter. Why? Because it is the only chance that the Democrats have of winning back the White House in 2020. Saddled with broken promises, whose nominee after a possible broker convention will either be a socialist who admires communists, a senile lecher who admires young girls, or a billionaire who admires power, the coronavirus is a much more effective candidate than Sanders, Biden, or Bloomberg. #Trump virus follows in the footsteps of #Trump hurricane, which was an attempt to blame a natural disaster and local corruption in Puerto Rico on President Trump. Y'all remember that? Anyway, and just as, how that crashed and burned. This is eventually going to crash and burn. But the concern is, what will be the casualties after it has crashed and burned? But just like that hashtag, was dusted off, the hashtag Hurricane Trump, is just like they decided to, okay, let's go pull that out, that crisis out, and let's just insert this, okay? We're going to dust off the old smears of the Hurricane Katrina, and we're going to insert, Trump was responsible for Puerto Rico. And now we're going to insert Trump is responsible for the coronavirus. That's what's going on. Right? So he says the truth about disaster relief and pandemic management is that it hasn't changed much between the administrations. The Bush administration dealt with the SARS epidemic in much the same way that the Obama administration dealt with the swine flu. And the Trump administration is using those same protocols right now. Okay? And that's basically because the actual decisions are being made by bureaucrats based on existing protocols. In other words, when these crises happen, it's really these deep state departments and bureaucrats who are executing on the protocol and kind of making the decisions, right? And so that's what we've been doing previously. And the best example of that, of how the deep state is making these decisions, is back when the Ebola virus occurred. According to Horowitz, he says the best example of this was the decision to fly back an infected American passenger from the Diamond Princess when Trump said not to do it. So in other words, I'm getting mixed up here. Excuse me. What has gone on is the deep state guy, his name, that he does name him here in this article. He's the Directorate of Operational Medicine, which is a bureau within the State Department. And basically, this bureau has decided to send back the people from the Diamond Princess, and whoever was in China dealing with this disease has told them to bring them back into the country. That's how the virus is so-called spreading. Excuse me. And I'm even suspicious of the numbers and that it's a real spread, because if you listen to the commentators who are narrating these supposed cases, listen very carefully how they're choosing their words. They're being very careful to choose their words so as to not subject themselves to libel, right? So they're saying things like, so-and-so this person was infected. He took ill, but we're not sure if it's the virus or they were possibly exposed, but we don't know if they've actually been infected. There's been a lot of talk around that. And then the people that they're saying that died, I'm going to need some receipts. I'm going to need some paperwork on the cases of the people that's actually died. I just don't trust these numbers. I don't think that the virus itself is made up. I think it is a real virus. I think it's, like they say, it's akin to the flu. And I think that they are exaggerating these cases such that they can make it appear to be this pandemic here in America so that it can start tanking the economy. And as it relates to China, what I believe that they're doing, I think that they inserted the virus into the culture and into their population and deliberately left them to not have what they needed to care for themselves. So, because the flu can kill you. I'm not disputing that this thing can kill you, but I don't think it is as deadly as they're making it out to be. It's no more deadly than the regular flu, in my opinion, or in my observation from just hearing about it, right? So I believe that because the Chinese inserted it purposely into the culture, twofold, probably again, and this is me suspecting, as a way to sabotage Trump, but also as a way to get their citizens in line. Because the next thing that I'm going to share with you as to why I'm believing this has to do with the doctor who was AKA the whistleblower who died from the virus, so-called. And then New York Post recently reported this week that that whistleblower doctor's colleague has also just died. Then 2 citizen journalists have gone missing since February the 7th. Okay, so put a bookmark there. But all that to say, and I'm kind of rambling here, forgive me. Let me reel it back in. I was reading you that piece from Mr. Horowitz where he was talking about how this bureaucrat decided to release these so-called infected people back into the population against Trump's advice or his initial mandate to keep everyone quarantined. And I was telling you about how the news media, when they're talking about the cases that are occurring in America, they're very vague with it. And then I'm believing that the folks in China who have had it and supposedly died from it only because the government did not act upon it so as to get these people treatment. And I believe that was deliberate. And the propaganda has been that the whistleblower who died of the virus was trying to blow the whistle to say, way back in December, to say we have this virus and you need to do something, government. I believe that he died because that wasn't really what he was blowing the whistle on. I think he was probably blowing the whistle to say, hey, the government has instructed the doctors to do this to the population. I think that was the whistleblower. And then the government has spun it to say, oh, he was blowing the whistles to say that we were just slow to respond to the crisis. And the reason that I say that is, again, why are these 2 citizen journalists all of a sudden missing? And I'm going to now pop over to this next article. And then I'll come back. Let's see, how am I doing on time? Okay, I got to hurry up and go. I got me on here for 27 minutes already. All right, so New York Post dated March the 3rd says Chinese doctor who worked with late whistleblower dead from the coronavirus. And it goes on to say a colleague of the Chinese whistleblower doctor who died of the coronavirus in the epicenter of Wuhan has also succumbed to the illness, according to a report. Dr. Meng Zongming, 57, died at the Jingyintang Hospital on Tuesday after all-out rescue efforts failed. He was serious and responsible for his work, and it goes into, all about telling him. And it says Dr. May worked in the same department with Dr. Li Weilang, 34, who died of the virus on February 7th after sounding the alarm about the illness. On December 30th, Lee sent out a warning over the WeChat messaging app advising fellow medical grad students to wear protective clothing to avoid infection after several patients from a local seafood market exhibited symptoms similar to SARS. He was one of 8 whistleblowers who tried to sound an early alarm about the novel virus, which has so far killed more than 3,100 people and infected more than 90,000 people, only to be denounced by authorities as rumor mongering. So that's the tea on that. Now, here's the tea on these citizen journalists. All right. And this one says, do I still have this? Where's it at? Where we go? I have to go back. Oh yes, here we go. Now this report comes from SCMP, which is the South China Morning Post. Okay. And it says missing Chinese citizen journalists highlight risk of telling the risk of telling Wuhan's story during the corona outbreak. And it says Chen Qishi and Fang Bing had become well known for their reports from the city at the center of the COVID-19 outbreak, but both are now thought to have been taken away by authorities. Tightly controlled state media has tried to put a positive gloss on the situation despite the rising death toll from the disease. The disappearances of two prominent citizen journalists who dared to challenge China's online censorship during the coronavirus outbreak has heightened concerns about how far residents and activists will be allowed to challenge the official state narrative. Qing Qishi was a lawyer, and Fang Bin was a Wuhan resident who became well known after he released a video clip of dead bodies in a van outside a major hospital. Both disappeared last week. The last video Chen posted was one of him interviewing a Wuhan native called A Ming, whose father died almost 2 weeks ago. A Ming had described how his father probably contracted the coronavirus that caused COVID-19 during a visit to the Wuhan hospital at the beginning of January for a health checkup. There were no safety precautions in place at the time. And it goes on to say, there's no health at the time. It says everybody thinks Mr. A Ming is brave. He feels that since he has experienced these things, he should share them. During their conversation, Chen noted that many people are worried that I will be detained, and he was last heard from on February the 7th. His friend Zhu Zhangdong, a MMA fighter who has become well known for challenging and defeating traditional martial arts practitioners, said Chen had been forcibly quarantined, but no one knew where he was. Then it says coronavirus lockdown in Wuhan means foreign residents with no flight out must sit tight. Fang was taken away by plainclothes police officers 2 days later, according to the Hong Kong broadcast RTHK. The Wuhan resident had become well known for the videos he filmed in the city's hospital and had called for people to resist the Communist Party. The pair were two of the most high-profile citizen journalists documenting the coronavirus outbreak, highlighting stories that did not appear in China's tightly controlled state media, including photographs of dead bodies in hospital corridors and piled up in vans. And then this piece goes on to show a video of Mr. Fang Bin talking about his experience in Wuhan and the things that he was seeing. But these people are missing, and two of the doctors are dead, supposedly from this virus. And again, I don't dispute that the virus is real. I don't dispute that it is killing people. But I do dispute, particularly here in America, it's spread like they're saying. And I feel as though they are, when I say they, I mean the left, the Democrat Party, are doing what they do best, which is to psychologically manipulate the public, create mass hysteria, create fear, so that they can get people to vote for them. Because they always, in order for them to win, they need to create a crisis. They need to create grievances in people, and they need to be, they need to have a villain, which in this case is Donald Trump, and then you need to have a damsel in distress. So that could be Black people, that could be Latino people at the border, that could be LGBT people, like whoever you are, you're their damsel in distress, and then guess what? They're gonna come and be your savior. And that's how they are depicting everything. Okay, the villain is the rich people, the damsel are the poor people, and who are the savior? The government. Never mind, all this time, they're the ones that their policies are the ones that are actually creating the problems that they're saving you from. So the savior is creating the problems that they're coming to save you from. And that's the okie doke. And this is what Mr. Horowitz and myself and many of us who are thinking like Mr. Horowitz all over this country who are supporting Trump, we peep this game. We're peeping this game. So I'm going to go back and finish this bit of this article that Mr. Horowitz points out on how this deep state operative is the one that gave the okay to bring these people back into this country. Because see, what you need to understand about the left and about these Marxist tactics and these socio-psychological manipulation tactics that governments use is all they need is the pretense. Like, again, I don't doubt that these things are happening in China. I do question the origin and the motivation of this particular virus at this particular time. I do question that. But what they do is they'll piggyback, just like, for instance, with the Ferguson thing, right? They wrote in and they said, oh, this is a crisis. So we're going to go in and we're going to co-opt it. We're going to go in and we're going to, redefine and insert our rhetoric into this cause because people's emotions are attached to it. And then we can start, low key massaging in our agenda and giving them our ideas so that they can think that they're their ideas. And then voila, I'm going to ask you to Google Darren Seals, okay, out of Ferguson for the outcome of that sort of thinking with Black Lives Matter, because that's where that all came from. The whole Black Lives Matter movement came out of an exploitation of the Ferguson incident. And then we see what it has morphed into, something that is totally antithetical and not even really related to Black men that they claim that they were, fighting for. It's now become something wholly different and comprehensive according to them. So it's the same thing with this. They see, people are, okay, these folks are dying in China. Let's co-opt this crisis. That's what I think is happening at best. At worst, it is a full-on coordination with China, in the sense that China says, okay, I'm going to create this crisis and you guys can hop on it and then we can work together to get this guy out of here. And my fingerprints as a Chinese won't be on it, because now I'm going to, be looking like I'm playing nice with Trump. And that's the other thing too. Like, I'm feeling like, they were pushing back, being very slow to make this deal with Trump. Then all of a sudden they're ready to make a deal. And then within some weeks, here we have a virus, a national epidemic that everyone's calling a pandemic. Something in the water isn't clean. And to wrap this up, I'm going to end with some of Mr. Horowitz's thoughts from his article. All right, so the protocol again has been the same across all administrations. Mr. Horowitz pointed out, right? It happened how the Obama administration dealt with the swine flu, how Bush dealt with SARS, Trump was dealing with this coronavirus, right? And President Trump had been told that nobody with the coronavirus would be flown to America. However, the State Department decided to do it anyway without telling him, and only made the announcement shortly after the planes landed in the United States. According to the Washington Post, as unfriendly an outlet to the administration as there is, Trump has since had several calls with top White House officials to say he should have been told that it should have been his decision, and that he did not agree with the decision that was made to bring these people back into the country. So who in the State Department made that decision? And Mr. Horowitz says that's a good question. You should be asking that. And according to the State Department briefing, the missions were carried out by the Directorate of Operational Medicine, which is within the Bureau of Medical Services. And you might think that sounds like, that would be a part of the Health and Human Services Department or the NIH. But lo and behold, it is a part of the deep State Department. Basically, the Directorate of Operational Medicine is a part of the bureau assigned to deal with crisis response, with a $250 million portfolio and a lot of employees that almost no one outside of Washington, D.C. has ever heard of. Unless, though, you remember the event at which Barack Obama honored the directorate, whose name is Mr. Dr. William Walters. He's the head of it. And Obama praised him for evacuating Ebola patients into the United States. And Trump was a critic of that, saying that didn't make any sense. And so here's what Obama said in response to that back a few years ago when he was in office. Obama said, "Now remember, the decision to move Kent, who I believe was the person infected with the Ebola virus, back to the United States was controversial. Some worried about bringing the disease to our shores, but what folks like William knew was that we had to make the decisions based on, not on fear, but on science," Obama said. By some, Obama meant, among others, Trump, who had been a strong critic of that move. Despite Obama's end-zone dance about how well they took care of this Ebola crisis, the State Department had badly botched the Ebola virus evacuation. Under Bush, the CDC had prepped an evacuation aircraft for flying out contagious Americans. But the Obama administration shelved all of that gear because of the cost and then failed to make use of it. The evacuation process led to the same infighting that we see going on now between the State Department and the CDC. But Dr. William Walters is still on duty. He's still on the payroll. In 2017, it was Walter who was boasting of prepping more Ebola evacuations, even over Trump's opposition to the practice. So he was still trying to do this in 2017. And he's still in control. So the question is simply this: is what Mr. William Walters says to justify him bringing these coronavirus people back. He says, "Are these evacuees?" Walter explained. And he said, "And do we follow our protocol?" And the answer is yes on both accounts, is what he says. So in other words, he's out here just, thumbing his nose like, listen, these are evacuees and this is our protocol. And yes, and that's what we did. We brought them back. Now what? So consulting with Trump was not part of the protocol even on such a major national security issue. In a congressional briefing, Walters boasted that the department executed the largest military evacuation of U.S. history, and that the safe and efficient evacuation of 1,174 people from Wuhan, China, and people on board the Diamond Princess cruise ship in Japan is a testament to the agility, proficiency, and dedication of our workforce to accomplishing our core mission, advancing the interests of the American people. So it's in the interest of the American people to bring 1,174 people from Wuhan, China, and from off the Diamond Princess and put them in the population. Okay? And the triumph of the administrative state and its bureaucratic protocols over the president was basically what he was saying. Look, we done triumphed over you again. We defied you again. So basically, Mr. Walters seems to think that the mission right now through the embassy is ultimately, ahead of all of the executive branch activities, is what they're saying. So in other words, they're saying what we're doing is we're ahead of the Trump administration. Don't pay any mind to what they're saying because we out here on the ground and this is what we're doing. But that is the problem right there. He says Walters got his job in 2011. He's a relic of the Obama era. That doesn't mean that his politics are those of his former boss, but that is not about him. This is not about him. It's about the reality that the White House doesn't make many of the most vital decisions and doesn't even know that they're being made until it's too late. All right, so I'm not going to go through all this because it's very long. I've been reading long enough anyway. But he says this last thing. There will be a cure for the coronavirus, but there's no cure for the spread of viral fake news. There is, however, a cure for the decisions that led to the coronavirus problem in the United States, and it's called the Constitution. America was meant to have a small government under the control of the people, not bureaucrats. The real disaster is bigger than the coronavirus. It is a fatal illness called big government. Unlike the coronavirus, it has a total mortality rate. No society that has succumbed to big government has ever survived it. And that is a ominous reality. So what say you people? I've given you my very unpopular opinion. My apologies if I've rambled and so forth, but I hope you followed me. I will have these links at the bottom, but that's the truth of what I think, guys. Something in the water is not clean about this virus, and I don't trust these politicians. I don't trust the Democrats. I don't trust the Republicans, and I definitely don't trust China. The timing of this virus, the way in which it has entered the country, all of it is suspicious. And my intelligence is insulted by our news media, who continues to prove themselves to really be, a state-controlled media operation. We no longer have a free press. We have a press that is devoted to Marxist socialist ideologies. And we know that by how they are reporting the news and who they're challenging and who they're choosing not to challenge. You can tell a lot by who they challenge and who they don't. So, yeah. Check us out on YouTube, subscribe to us on, follow us on Facebook, Politics and Religion, and you can follow us individually on social media at Clarity Speaks for me, and Tony is at Right Hand Productions. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us, and until next time, deuces.